All right, good morning, good morning. So, Cameron, how you doing this morning?
I'm exhausted. Long day at work, but I'm here.
Okay, we got Steve in the chat already. We got a couple of people already watching. Good morning, everybody.
Steve is back.
And I'm glad to see we've got Zaluska the Slav is with us. Says good morning to the crusty crew. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but love you anyway, Chunky Monkey. Chris is with us. Good morning, sunshine. All right, and Steve, just go ahead and put your thinking cap on because you might have to moderate a little bit today. I made it a point to title this episode, let's see, Georgia Voting Restrictions Bill. I'm kind of baiting the trolls there because I know my people will watch, but hopefully that title gets a little traction from the lefties. In fact, go ahead, Cameron.
Well, I just real quick before we get into all that, it's rare that we make mistakes, but I made one yesterday. I had it backwards with the type of drugs George Floyd and his girlfriend thought they were buying. According to Tim Pool, they knew they were buying speedballs, as opposed to being sold speedballs either in error or in bad faith. So, small mistake, but a mistake. Doesn't change the color of the analysis that we gave yesterday because all your martyrs are monsters. However, I said it many times. If we're wrong, hey, let's be wrong on air, and everybody learns something. And yeah.
Amen to that. All right, now we've got Uncle Steve with us too. Good to see you. Good to see you. So, sometimes the universe just lines up for you. I wanted to talk about the Georgia voter law today, or rather, I wanted to talk about the Georgia voter law as soon as it was convenient or possible to do so. Cameron wanted to do the George Floyd update yesterday, and so we did. And today is normally we try to do WTF CNN, or as I like to say, WTF CCPNN. We just happened to have a lovely article from CNN this morning. I think, did we just lose Cameron? Cameron, did we just lose you?
No, I'm here. I'm in a funky area, so I muted myself not to interrupt your talk.
Okay, no problem. Looks like my stinger didn't work anyway, so that's unfortunate. I'll have to work on that. I see what happened. No problem. Anyway, so where was I? Okay, so we've got an article from CNN. Let's dig into this. Atlanta mayor issues order to mitigate the impact of Georgia's new voting law. Oh, dear. CNN. Atlanta Mayor Kiesha Lance Bottoms issued an executive order Tuesday that directs the city's chief equity officer to implement a series of actions to mitigate the impact of Georgia's new election law, imposing a series of voting restrictions. There's a lot in this article, but this first sentence alone, Jesus. Okay, let's start with the first thing we see. Atlanta Mayor Kiesha Lance Bottoms. Let's not forget, this is Miss Black Girl Magic.
Oh, you stole my joke. I was waiting on you to take a breath just so I could jump in with a pun about that.
So, Kiesha Lance Bottoms is similar to Justice Sotomayor. She made explicit, overt, racist comments that would have had a white person in the same position, honestly, probably sued and prosecuted over the comments she made. She said she won her office because of that black girl magic. She also made comments about her expectations that people should vote for her because she's black, which is absolutely disgusting. Your skin color and your genetic composition, your gender, all that stuff. Look, unless we're talking about serving in combat or competing in professional sports or, doing anything manual labor related, none of those attributes are relevant. None of them. And if they are a part of your platform, like for example, if you're running for the president and you promise that you will choose a vice president who is a female of color, your bigotry right there should disqualify you, according to the rules that the left insists upon. So that Kiesha Lance Bottoms is the mayor of Atlanta, that an open, notorious bigot like Kiesha Lance Bottoms is the mayor of Atlanta, is sickening to begin with. Well, now we've gotten past the subject of the sentence, let's dig into the city's chief equity officer.
Yeah.
This person should be fired immediately. Why?
There shouldn't be a chief equity officer.
Exactly.
That's terrifying. Equity, especially when it comes from the government, is pretty scary.
The chief equity officer. Understand
I didn't even
that
know such a thing existed.
what they
I'm baffled by that.
and what is it that they mean when they say equity? When they say equity, especially when you're talking about a government official whose job is titled chief equity officer, you're talking about someone whose job it is to determine how best to take from those who have and give it to the less adequate. You're talking about somebody whose job is to implement not socialism, but communism. So the closest thing there is to a bright line distinction between socialism and communism, because they are essentially the same thing. Socialism seeks to take and to redistribute. Communism seeks explicitly to take from everyone and redistribute the minimum necessary survivable sustenance while retaining the maximum possible quantity of resource at the highest and most exclusive concentrated level. Steve says, these are reasons I don't spend much money in Fulton County anymore. I avoid Fulton County to the greatest extent possible. I really do.
It's a real shame that it's basically impossible to drive across Atlanta without going through it.
And, I mean, think about last summer during the BLM riots, after the Rayshard Brooks incidents we talked a little bit about yesterday. BLM activists went and burned down the Wendy's where the incident happened. And again, absolutely clear-cut case of self-defense. The fact that those officers were even investigated afterwards is shocking, because it was such a clear-cut case of self-defense caught on video. If anybody has
reasonable.
If anybody has any doubt, yes, an investigation is reasonable. An investigation to this extent. Go and watch my video, The Ballad of Rayshard Brooks. There is no mitigating evidence external to the content of that video which can possibly justify that man stealing a weapon from police officers and then firing it at them. Now, there could be if that were all there were to the story, there could be mitigating circumstances, sure. But the video that I put out includes the immediately preceding mitigating circumstances where the police were called because this inebriated criminal, repeat offender, child abuser who was out on COVID release while inebriated, fell asleep at a drive-thru, and then decided to fight 2 cops. Right? Those are your mitigating circumstances. Those are your circumstances, not mitigating circumstances. Those are your circumstances. Now, if the circumstances prior had been that the police were completely unjustified in approaching or attempting to arrest the assailant, that'd be very different. But that's not the case here.
Bare bottoms.
Yeah. So, after they burned down the Wendy's, Mayor Bottoms did nothing. The police did nothing. They let the building burn down. They let them begin to try and establish an autonomous zone in the area until a little black girl was killed by BLM activists. Only then did Bottoms say anything. Because she was completely on board. Because she's a notorious bigot. She's a Democrat, a leftist activist. Right? She didn't do anything until a little black girl was killed. And please believe, if it had been a little white girl, she may have said something about it being a tragic loss, but I strongly doubt it. Because, like we already pointed out, this woman's campaign for the mayorship was an overtly racist one. Black girl magic. And we're almost halfway through that sentence. So the executive order directs the city's chief equity officer to implement a series of actions to mitigate the impact of Georgia's new election law, imposing a series of voting restrictions. Okay, I'm going to hit the end of the sentence first, then I'll move back a little bit to the series of actions. Imposing a series of voting restrictions. You're liars.
Okay,
that sentence is a lie.
Check it out.
Apparently Siri heard me say something that got her attention.
Okay.
Go ahead.
There's a bit to chew into there.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
this is something that I only just learned yesterday.
And we're gonna try to be careful on this video today, because our video where we sent Stacey Abrams an invoice, that one got taken down by YouTube, and they said that we made claims that violate policy. I have a copy of the video, and I can tell you unequivocally, we did not make the claims that are forbidden by the policy. I won't say what those claims are on this episode because we want to keep this one up as much as possible. But I will be putting that one, I'll be making sure that one is still available on Odyssey and Rumble and BitChute and all those. But
okay.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. When I heard about all the restrictions on voting, it restricts people's access to voting, panic, and it's racist, blah, blah, blah. I thought it was because they tightened up the window for absentee ballot requests. But it turns out that prior to the passage of this law, your local precinct could go above and beyond whatever the minimum amount of voting time was. And there were some precincts in DeKalb County and Fulton County that already had Saturday and Sunday voting available. And theoretically, you could leave your polling precinct open for 24 hours if you chose to. Now, of course, nobody did, but you could. There's language in the law that says you can only vote on the days that are laid out in the bill. And while the bill does increase the minimum number of days, it does do that. You can't go above the minimum and optional days that are in the bill. So in a very technical sense, there are some precincts that will have fewer total days available to them for early voting. This is where they're hanging their hat on the restrictions with voting.
Yeah, except they keep talking about that's not what they talk about. That's not what any of them are complaining about openly. The complaints they're making are about the voter ID requirement, which, by the way, you had to have a voter ID before this law in Georgia. The expansion to the voter ID requirement on the absentee ballots is for an absentee ballot. You have to request one, for starters, and then on that ballot you have to put either your driver's license number or the serial number from whichever approved ID you're using, or the last four of your social. You have to include some sort of serialized numerical identifier which is explicitly connected to you and can be used to verify your identity for the purposes of requesting the ballot. And that's the thing that they're saying is racist, which, you know, it's especially interesting because the claim that that's racist, it's okay. What these people believe is that black people are too stupid or too poor to use the internet, to find the DMV, to go and get a license. Okay, the ID is free in the state of Georgia, right? The ID that you need to vote is free. And I would also go back just a little bit and say, okay, these people are arguing about African Americans who are natural born citizens, right? They're not making their arguments explicitly about criminal aliens, although that's what they're really shooting for. They're shooting to make sure that they're hostile foreign invaders are allowed to vote in our national elections, which is absurd. But they're framing it around the question of denying the vote to black people, and one of the reasons they're doing that is because they saw huge numbers of blacks vote for Trump rather than the current resident. And what's funny about that is if they're citizens and you can use the last four of your social, then don't you already have the ID? I mean, you can use the last four of your social on the absentee ballot under the new law, right? So, again, where's the problem? Where's the complaint? Oh, I see. Your complaint isn't that citizens are asked to identify themselves. Your complaint is that hostile foreign invaders are being prevented from voting in elections for which they are not qualified.
I'm going to have to give you a little pushback, but not in the way that you think. Yes, they are complaining that the ID is racist, but there's a reason why it's so important that precincts in Fulton County and DeKalb County are going to be affected by the fact that there's basically a maximum amount of time you're allowed to have to vote. And it's because those are largely black areas. The inference is that the law was written that way in order to disproportionately affect Fulton and DeKalb County because they already voluntarily had weekend voting available, and this restricts their ability to have weekend voting.
Yeah, and that's adorable. Let me just clarify something real quick right there. Here's the law. And so let's take a quick peek at this particular provision. Damn, I thought I was already pulled up to it. Under the new law, because of the amount of time, doobie-doobie-doo. Okay, that's the absentee stuff. Doo-doo-doo. Okay. If such elector does not have a Georgia driver's license, an oath, a blank application. Basically, if during the last election anybody had to wait in line for more than 1 hour and your precinct has more than 2,000 electors in it, then you have to break it into an additional precinct. So basically the law requires that if you have too many voters in your precinct to deal with getting them through the polls in a timely manner, then you have to break up your precinct. Steve points out they moved the All-Star game to Colorado, who also require ID and have decent time rules. Steve, I also pulled that up. These are the acceptable forms of ID for voting in Colorado. A valid Colorado's driver's license, U.S. passport, employee ID, pilot's license, military ID, copy of current utility bill, certificate of degree of Indian or Alaska Native blood, valid Medicare or Medicaid card, certified copy of U.S. birth certificate, certified documentation of naturalization, valid student ID, valid veteran ID, valid ID card issued by a federally recognized tribal government certifying tribal membership.
Look, I'm not saying I have a problem with it. I am saying that there are some people that are using the argument that it does restrict access to voting because there were already precincts that were voluntarily going outside of what the minimum standards were. I actually think it's intelligent to define when you can and can't vote. And I'm pretty fucking shocked that it was so loosely defined before this voter ID law was passed.
I'm disappointed that you dropped an F-bomb there because I was hoping to save it for my next little piece. I'm gonna limber up.
Sorry, that was my plan was to mess you up.
No, you're fine.
I'm just pointing out, and this is an important component to this, that there are people that genuinely believe that this is why this was done. Because it will target these areas. Now, look, I don't even have a problem with forcing precincts that can't manage themselves to divide into smaller precincts. Again, that's an intelligent thing. And whenever you've got a big, giant precinct where you're processing thousands of votes, that is where you've got some interesting opportunities for frogs to have erections. But still, nonetheless, there are people that are making the claim that they're technically going to have less access to voting, and they're not wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, the evidence has been very clear that the vast majority of amphibian priapism did in fact occur within Fulton County. Assuming that any such extended excitation was a significant factor, which is not a claim that I'm making aloud. But, okay, so getting back to here, and here comes your F-bomb. Atlanta Mayor Kiesha Lance Bottoms issued an executive order that directs the chief equity officer to implement a series of actions to mitigate the impact of Georgia's new election law. Georgia, the state, Georgia's new election law. Here's my question. Who exactly the fuck do you think you are? Atlanta Mayor Kiesha Lance Bottoms, because it's clear that if you think you can, that you have the authority to take a unilateral executive action which affects the state law, then you are sorely mistaken. She needs to be treated like a rogue operative. She is attempting to usurp authority which does not belong to her. Now, the article goes on to say, the city of Atlanta does not have authority over state election law, as I said. So the administrative order cannot change any of the new requirements. Most of the actions focus on voter education, staff training to better assist Atlanta residents with information on the new law changes or how to obtain necessary identification. I find this idea of staff training in this context to be highly suspicious. So let me tell you something. You see the little yellow square on the wall back there next between the U.S. flag and the Trump flag, that says poll watcher Christopher Lowry. I was certified poll watcher, and I was there as a poll watcher for some of the election votes, and I was there as one of the observers during the recount. And you know what I saw? I'm in Georgia, right? You know what I saw in my polls? Where electioneering, which includes the wearing of campaign paraphernalia, apparel. You can't wear a Trump or Biden t-shirt, ball cap, so on and so forth in the area. The poll workers were wearing overtly political apparel. And it was all the same side. It was all leftist crap, right? And nobody said boo. I even mentioned it to people there. I mentioned it to officials there. And, oh no, that one's fine because blah, blah, blah. Oh, I see. That one's fine because it works for you, huh? So the poll workers, by a wide margin, and I was treated by the poll workers with extreme suspicion and skepticism. I was there in an official capacity. I had to sign affidavits and oaths and all that stuff. I had to get a briefing. I had to be certified and qualified to go and do that job. But I was treated with extreme suspicion by the poll workers there. Mostly. I mean, there were a few that I got to chit chat with and were okay, but they were not happy to have me there. Thankfully, I'm a giant, terrifying monstrosity of a man, so they didn't go out of their way to try and eject me like they did so many other Republican poll watchers. But I'm telling you, the poll watchers, by and large, are essentially BLM activists. So when you tell me that Kiesha Lance Bottoms has decided to direct her chief equity officer to spend Atlanta taxpayer and Georgia taxpayer dollars, let's not forget. I mean, mayor of Atlanta, there are tax dollars going into that city from all over the state. And she is instructing her chief equity officer to spend taxpayer money to promulgate the lie that this new election law restricts access to the ballot. That's just staggering to me.
Did you have a chance to look at the executive order itself, and specifically what it does, what it says?
No, I've actually found that rather difficult to find this morning. But in this article it says, okay, Republicans cast the measure dubbed the Election Integrity Act of 2021 as necessary to boost confidence in elections after the 2020 election saw then-President Donald Trump make repeated unsubstantiated claims of fraud. But Bottoms emphasized Tuesday that voting restrictions in the law will disproportionately impact Atlanta residents, particularly in communities of color and other minority groups. That's a lie. Her order specifically aims to provide... Okay, so... that is an unsubstantiated claim.
Well, no, that it's part of why I made such a big deal about pointing out the technicality that some of these precincts will have fewer total days available to vote. Like it's how they're manipulating the language.
Oh, I want to give you some pushback on that, but I can't do it and keep this video up. Okay, I hate to do it, Cam, but I'm gonna gloss over that for now. Her order specifically aims to provide training to staff members on voter registration, along with early absentee and in-person voting, in order that they may communicate this information to city residents. The order also has provisions for disseminating information about how to obtain the identification forms needed for absentee voting and adding QR codes that lead the voter registration information websites on water bills and other mail. Okay, so real quick, as far as disseminating information on how to obtain identification forms, go to the DM. Step 1, go to the DMV. That's it. There is no step 2. Just go to the DMV.
Yeah, boy, you want to talk about the soft bigotry of low expectations. How do I get an ID? I've got no clue. Oh my God. Like, good Lord. And they say that we're the racists because we expect that you possess enough intelligence to get an ID. And frankly, we talked about it before on this show. I think voting's too damn easy. Honestly, what, 4 weeks of early voting and all that? Look, if you have trouble figuring out how to go to the DMV and get an ID, don't vote. Don't. Please notice that it's the left that wants the uneducated masses to suddenly get a fire in their belly for voting. People like us that are plugged in and engaged and actually have philosophical underpinnings and all of that, it's not us that want all the stupid people to vote, but it's the left.
No, they rely on stupid people voting.
Well, there's a lot of stupid Republicans too, but there's a difference in the level of reliance, I suppose. The left wants ignorant people to vote. I think that's a more accurate way to put it. They want you to not.
That's fair. That's fair, and that's one of the reasons that what is it, HR 1? Is it HR 1 is the Democrat amphibian priapism bill? It's the one that tries to change the voting age to 16. It's not complicated. The objective is to get more people who are actively exposed to the current programming regimen voting. It's all about getting the voters younger and younger. You want to hook them while they're young. You want to catch them before they have paid taxes on wages. You want to catch them before they've had an original thought. You want to catch them before they have families to think about. You want to catch them before they've done anything other than suck at the government teat. When you've still got their ears, when you've still got them by the ears, pumping in that bullshit that being dependent on the government is a good thing.
And there's a lot of stuff in the bill that I don't like. Like, drop boxes are a permanent thing now. Every county has to have at least one drop box in it.
Yeah, did we forget that the drop boxes were a measure for the pandemic? And that's something that I've already gotten on to several people at the Georgia GOP about. Like, guys, this was an emergency measure, and it was a bad idea then. It never should have happened to begin with. But since it's already happened and I can't change what has happened, we can get rid of the emergency measures now that the emergency's over. Which, by the way, the emergency is over. Take off your fucking masks.
Yeah. Boy, that's a whole nother show for a whole nother day, but we might never take off the mask, bro. You recognize this. I don't agree with it, but factually speaking, I don't think that mask is ever going to go away. Not completely.
Yeah, well, you're right. That is another conversation. And we are 7 minutes over, so we're pretty much out of time. Do you have anything you want to add before we close this one out there, Cameron?
I just want to add that this law and the way that it's being treated and referred to is part of the reason why the whole racist thing has and not only has it lost its power, but it now sends people in the opposite direction. As soon as I heard the Georgia voter ID law was racist, I basically tuned out.
Yeah.
There's no there's no way it restricts any type of voting. And because of that, I was very surprised to learn that actually in Fulton and DeKalb County, there will technically be restrictions that are put in place, even though they're not. The inference is that they're racially motivated, even though it's more like, okay, look, we're just setting the rules. If anything, I'd be willing to believe that it was done this way to target Democrat voters. Those Democrat voters just happen to be black. But the cry of racism actually shuts down conversation in a terrible way at this point. You can't get anything done as soon as it's said. And this law is an example of it.
Yeah, that's solid. And before I close it out, Zaluska the Slav says, I just want to add that I'm disappointed that the trolls never showed up. Good game, clean chat. Yeah, I'm a little disappointed too. I was hoping to get boosted numbers and a bunch of people running their mouths that I could banter with a bit, but alas, cowardice still consumes the enemy. And that will be our show for today. Love you guys. Thanks for watching. Be safe out there, and we'll see you tomorrow.